Hi. Is financial data enough for investing? Warren Buffett famously said that accounting is the language of business. But is it enough? Say you are a CFA, a chartered financial analyst at the highest level, level 3. All you were ever taught in school were financial statements and numbers and formulas. But are these enough to let you forecast where a stock is going? And if not, what can you do to take other CFAs' money by doing what they cannot? Well, there are other areas of human conflict that ask a similar question. How about history? There too, human groups fight other groups for advantage. Whereas in the economy, companies fight for share of market, in history, countries fight for share of territory. Yes, it's a bit different, because when companies fight, they don't kill each other's employees. Fighting countries often do. But there are similarities too. Both countries and companies have plans, leaders, money, budgets, and goals where success depends on beating other groups. So, what can you learn from historical battles about commercial battles and stocks? First off, what is the historical equivalent of a CFA, a stock analyst? Obviously, it is an intelligence analyst who tries to forecast the outcome of war based on data. But which data? Here then is a thought experiment for you. Imagine you are an intelligence analyst at a Middle European country we shall call Germania. You are working for the Germanic Bureau of National Defense, also known as the BND. Your boss just handed to you the last summary of the latest 20 years financial statements of two neighboring countries. Let's call them Ukraine and Rusonia. The data is comprehensive, both of the economies and the militaries. Now, these two neighboring countries are not the same. Rusonia's army is 2 or 3 times bigger than Ukrainia's, and also has different weapons and personnel. Rusonia has more cannons and tanks, while Ukraine has more battle tractors and handmade drones. Yes, Rusonia also has kryptonite bombs, while Ukraine doesn't, but it's unlikely they'd be used, or the Rusonian leader's concubines will be kicked out of their Italian villas. Is this all you have? You ask your boss? No, he says. We also have this, and he hands you pages and pages of the two countries' figures for GDP, GDP per capita, percent of assets owned by the government, total defense spending, perhaps money going to corruption, tons of food stored, capital spendings, in short, anything expressible in numbers and categories, like number of big tanks, number of small tanks, number of missiles, all of this you can have. This treasure of data is stored in IBM computers, to which you get the encryption key. What is the mission, you ask? It is this, the boss tells you. Rusonia and Ukraine are about to go to war over disputed territory containing sorghum, wheat, kryptonite deposits, and fertilizer, just like Pepsi and Coke warring over market share, or Apple and IBM, or Ford and GM. Both countries' presidents are confident they will win. And you ask, which of the countries do we support? Your boss says, at present none, until our government learns who is more likely to win. But why wait, you ask? Because, your boss tells you, our Germanian cabinet needs to know which of the two governments, Rusonia or Ukraine, to suck up to more and which to distance ourselves from publicly. But why is that, you ask? It's in the national long-term interest, your boss snaps. And by the way, the Franconian government nearby is going through the same process for the same purpose, but keep it under your head. Jawohl, you said, of course. Your boss narrows his eyes and adds, also, we want to know if the winner of the two may win too decisively, because if it's Rusonia, we'd have to suck up to them extra hard and soon. But if it's Ukraine, it'd be worse, because they'd become too big for the breaches, and together with Polonia, they'd compete with us for sucking up to the Merconians, whose kryptonite bombs, by the way, we host on the quiet. You say, and all this will come out from the numbers? Oh no, your boss says, it never does. That's why we need people like you. You don't really like his tone of voice, but as a good analyst, you say, understood. Of course, find out who will win and by how much and who by too much, if any. Yeah, says your boss, you got it. You then salute and depart with the paperwork, eager to do your job. But how to go about it? Do you have enough information? Certainly you have enough data, but is it also information? And if so, is it the right kind? Besides, it's all numbers. The database appears to have every category that's measurable. But what's the information that is not measurable, yet it is important? Like what kind? Let's pause here and switch hats. You are no longer an intelligence analyst, but a research analyst at a leading investment boutique with a CFA 3 designation. Your boss, the research director, hands you the assignment. Last month, Pepsi's chairwoman declared she is going to fight Coke for market share in both the US and Europe. The question is, can Pepsi win this commercial war over the next 3 to 5 years? If you can come up with an answer, institutional clients of your boutique will do much more of the trading through your company and you'll get a Fed bonus. But can you find this out? Assume you have all the financial CompuStat files of Pepsi and Coke and the value line summary pages and everything filed with the SEC in the EDGAR database. You know the company's numbers backwards and forwards thoroughly, only numbers. And oh yes, you can also have all the computing power you want and all the cheap labor of CFA and MBA interns who would work for practically nothing on the numbers, just to add a line to the resumes. And yes, again, you also have access to hundreds of formulas of regression analysis, neural networks, genetic algorithm, and the latest charting service of Dr. Rorschach, a Nobel Prize winner. But is all this enough? So you two retire to your office and scan the financial statements. There are also lots of ratios, both for Pepsi and Coke. Current ratios and PE ratios and debt to equity ratio and EV to EBITDA, all down to 3 decimals, some to 4. And also Z-score and Q ratios and net working capital, and more. The question is, can you produce from all this a reliable forecast of which company will win the market battle? And if so, how decisively? And so presumably, each stock would be a long and the other a short. Let's pause again. As I'm sure you realize, this assignment is directly comparable to the one before, of forecasting which country, Ukraine or Rusonia, would win based on numbers only. So, for the third time, do you have all the data to make a forecast? In either case, clearly not. Why not? What's missing? Well, let's start with a plan. That's in the future, not in the past. The past numbers say nothing about that. So how can you evaluate a battle plan, either commercial or military? Past numbers won't do it for you, nor did you learn it in the CFA program. Or how about leadership? That's people. The CFA said nothing about people either. For example, leaders who inspire the troops to work long and hard to achieve a clear, worthy goal usually win against leaders who demoralize their troops. Yes, like IBM versus IBM, like Apple versus IBM 2 decades ago. But how can you know which leadership is which? Ukrainia's leader is said to be a tough, modest guy with one wife only who lives in a 3-room flat, while the Rusonian leader lives in a palace and has 3 official concubines and an aircraft carrier-sized yacht. Does it matter? How to gauge this? How about asking the troops? Because clearly you cannot find the answer to this in the databases. Now, what about the troops' quality? Especially the mid-level leaders, the sergeant and the corporals. Are they slaves to nose candy? Or are they amateur boxers and chess players who invent fighting tricks in their sleep? The equivalent questions can be asked about commercial operations and mid-level managers. How good are they? But again, you never learn this in your CFA program. What can we conclude? First, that it's hard to forecast the outcome of military conflict, of wars, based only on numbers. So it must be equally hard to do it for commercial conflicts in the market. But second, because it's hard, those who can't find the answers to the non-numerical questions have an advantage over those who can't. Sure, if you see a giant fighting a midget, the probability is the giant would win eventually, but not always. Apple, while still a midget and run by a genius, Steve Jobs, won against IBM, who was then run by ninnies. And North Vietnam won both against France and the US. What were the factors that contributed to these historical wins, both in the battlefield and in the market? And how can you find where these factors are now? One thing is sure, you cannot do it by perusing financial statements at home at your desk sipping coffee. You have to go out and sleuth for them physically, because if you don't, then sleuths like me who do will take your money. End of analogy. By the way, the above is just one anecdote from my coming book, The Advanced Sleuth Investor, which compares investing to other competitive activities to teach you how to take the money of those who didn't read the book. See you next time.